Something's burning. I hope it ain't me. Welcome to the Pit Stop Ranch. Today we're going to take a break from doing paint and body on Jimmy and circle back and play a little bit with our junkyard 454. Now, if you recall, in the last video on this, we tore it down to take a look at the insides and see the condition of it. And there's some good and some bad and some ugly. This video, I want to go ahead and get in here and take a bunch of measurements of the internals on this engine. Take measurements of the crank, take measurements of the bore. Those measurements are to give us an idea on what materials, parts we need to buy. We need to figure out what we want to ask the machine shop to do. Now, the machine shop is going to go through and take all the exact same measurements plus a whole bunch more to determine the health of the block. What I want to check is it appears as though there's no taper in these bores. Taper towards the top, open up towards the top, and then have the top ring. And that taper is the rings, the compression rings, squeezing out against the wall as it goes up, as they're sealing, and then actually slightly removing material as it goes up, gradually creating that taper. I also want to check the diameter of the cylinders. So it's a taper, you check the diameter top and bottom, and so I'll be checking the diameter anyways, but I want to see what the diameter is and compare that to the stock number. Now, I'm already probably going to have to bore this thing out. The question is, how much am I going to need to bore out? Now, I don't think it's going to be much. I just think it's going to be more than what you can accomplish with the simple hone. Question is, what is the current bore? With aftermarket pistons, even if they're stock replacement pistons, but overbore pistons will usually have a number stamped in here like 030 or 020, 060, or just 60, 30, 20, 10, whatever it is, in the face. Now, it could be on the skirt, it could be under here, it could be, there's anywhere where you got relative flatness that you could emboss some numbers. Those numbers would be an indicator, dead giveaway, that the bore has been oversized, the cylinder has been bored, and it's a bigger piston. None of the pistons have any markings on that, so I'm fairly certain that, and flat top with valve reliefs is, I believe, the standard piston for a Gen 6 454. So I'm fairly certain that these are the stock pistons, came new from the factory, and the bore is the stock bore. That said, I want to confirm that. We're going to check the bore and confirm, and then put together a plan to go forward. Okay, let's talk measuring tools. Most of you, of course, have a set of feeler gauges. This is a veneer calipers, a little bit different from digital or a set of dial calipers. These are actually more accurate than dial calipers. They're just harder to read. I'm not planning on actually using these for anything because the simple fact of the matter is they're not really as accurate as you want for this project. Nearly as accurate as a good set of micrometers. Here is a cheap set of micrometers. These are Chinese, made in China, as you can see. Harbor Freight Specials. This is a set of used micrometers I got at the Pomona swap meet. There's actually calibrations. The next calibration for this is it 2-3 caliber micrometer is April 23rd 2003. So when we get to April 23rd 2003, this needs to be recalibrated. I believe the Mitutoyo, which are made in Japan, they're a good set. This one here needs to be calibrated in September 24th of 2010, so it's only 12 years out of calibration. That was a relatively inexpensive set to get at the swap meet. You got the challenges of used tools, but you got them. Swap meet, I picked up these. Mitsutoyo as well. These are internal bore gauges. You measure, you set that up, you get get it as good as you can. You tighten up the end, and then you measure with an outside micrometer. This is what I prefer to use to measure bores with. Now this is an internal micrometer set from Starrett. Starrett is one of the world leaders in precision tools. You use these different end effects. They go into here. See, this is for 4.5, and you sit there and directly measure it as a like a micrometer. It's a little challenging to use, but it's a very, very precise way of doing it. To work with the internal bore gauges, I picked up these new Mitsutoyo micrometers, outside micrometers. These are brand new. I mean, I think I've had them a couple of years now, but they're basically not used. They're in excellent shape. So I've got them for the purpose of doing these sort of measurements. Having all the measurement tools are wonderful. However, if you do not know what the heck you're measuring or what it is supposed to be or the tolerances or etc., it's pointless, it's useless. So we have a service manual for the year that, well, that's a 99, but the one in the C10 is a 98. So this is the 98 CK series truck manual. This here is the engine section, and this has every single measurement in both metric and inches. So I can go through and compare. It has the tolerances. It has the maximum and the minimum. Now, for the ease of everything, I've created this simple chart to go ahead and record the information we want to take, so that we can record it here, compare it to this, and have an informed decision on how we want to proceed. If you recall, this was the cylinder that has the pitting down here at the bottom. It's conceivable that just a heavy honing might be able to do it, but I would feel better if it's apart, just to go ahead and go all the way and bore it out. But first, let's check every cylinder's bore. Now, a quick scan of the book. The cylinder bore 4.2500 to 2507, so 7/10,000. So yeah, we're going to be able to see that. This internal bore gauge is 3.5 to 6. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and get it in and try and get it as square as we can, lock it down. And for those of you who can read micrometers, this is the 4 to 5 inch. So this is 4.2. You can barely make out the threshold of the hash mark between 2 and 3. And you see we're just a little bit past 0, but not even to the 1. So this is 0.42505, so half of a 10,000ths. Now, half of a 10,000ths is, to claim that level of accuracy under these conditions, is utter rubbish. You're not going to get it. That's just not true. However, that tells us that this is effectively, this is the factory bore, because it's in between. It could be as high as that 7 point up there versus right there. So that is the top of this bore. Okay, let's write this down. Cylinder number 2, bore top 4.25005. Let's do it again. We're going to be doing it, we'll do it at 90 degrees. 4.25025. Since I think the bores, because of the water damage, need to be bored out, I might as well, the cost of doing 20 over, 10 over, 20 over, 30 over is the same, so I might as well do 30 over and use these pistons. These are the pistons I bought when I was going to hot rod the engine to go into the C10. I chose HyperEutectic Pistons. I went ahead and just assumed I was going to bore it 30 over. The stock pistons were HyperEutectic. And HyperEutectic is merely just a reference to the grain structure and alloy composition of the pistons. It means there's a extra silicate in it, which makes them a little tougher than straight cast. However, they are just cast, but they're more thermally stable, which means their coefficient of thermal expansion is lower, at least within the heat range that your engine these will be operating in. So as a result, you can make them a little bigger, a little tighter to fit to the bore, and therefore seal better, and therefore more efficient. They're not meant, and never were meant, to be an alternative to forged. Forged pistons, forged parts are just stronger, and if you're going to be running real performance, you want to run forged. If you notice, they have this raised area on it. And if you compare that with the stock pistons, you will see it's flat with a couple valve reliefs. This has got the high area with only single valve relief. So the idea of this, of course, this is to bump up the compression ratio so that instead of the 9.5 to 1 compression ratio the engine came from the factory, I can run 10 to 1 compression ratio. Since we got it bored up, I'm going to run these pistons, and especially since I've already got them. Okay, a low cost, easy way of measuring bore diameter is to take one of the old rings, slip it in there, slip it in there, go down just past the witness mark. You take the piston, and if you just cram it in there to square it up, then you take the feeler gauges and check your gap. Alright, that's 12 thousandths. It goes in there pretty nice. Try 20 thousandths. Kind of snug. Check the book. 12 to 29 thousandths is the range. So 20 is a little tight, and 12 was way too loose. Let's try 18 thousandths. Okay, that's a nice snug fit. Could go a little bit tighter. Okay, 19 thousandths looks like that's the answer, 19 thousandths. So, next step, go ahead and push this down to the bottom, just above the other witness mark. And again, you want to square it up. Pushed it in there. You could use it to square it up, just like that. And you check it again. Now in this case here, it's 19 thousandths, both at the top of the cylinder and the bottom of the cylinder. The other thing I want to do on the crank, because of the uneven pulses due to the combustion cycle and up and down in acceleration, it's not a constant wear all the way around on the crank. And we have noticed that all bearings are completely chewed. We need to check roundness on the journals, both the rod and main journals, to see whether or not they have been become ovular, actually more egg-shaped. If they are round, as they should be, then a light cleanup, little light polishing, and we can throw a new set of stock size bearings on it. If we decide the scoring is a little too much, we can have the crank reground. If we get them reground, then we need to get some oversized bearings. Okay, next step is we want to go ahead and measure their journals. We got the 5 main journals and we have the 4 rod journals. Number 2 main journal is badly scored, and as a result it's probably a good idea just go ahead and get this reground, take 10 thousandths off. I happen to have 10 thousandths under bearings, but the cost of grinding it and redoing it is actually exceeds the cost of a set of bearings, so we're going to do it not because I happen to have the parts on the shelf, but because it needs it. I'm afraid of that. Now you can be cheap and you go ahead and go over all of this with like 1,000 grit and then polish all of these and then hope for the best. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is a nice low buck approach. Being the level of mental illness that I have regarding this stuff, I'm going to be compelled to go ahead and turn it, go ahead and get them ground. That said, let's go ahead and measure these, see what they look like. I'm going to go main journal number 1. Main journal number 1. Four, 5, 4, 6, 4, 7. This is 2.7475. I am getting nominally under what they're supposed to be. 2.7482 to 2.489. And I'm getting consistently under that. That could partially be the tools I'm using and me myself. The operator, combination of operator error as well as quality of the tools I'm using. I happen to be using the Chinese micrometers because the one I have, Mitutoyo, that I have in this size, the anvil on it shows some rusting, some corrosion. I think it's not any good, so I trust this one a little better, a little more. Okay, after finishing measuring all the mains at 90 degrees, looking for if it's they're become egg-shaped or not, which they haven't, the deviation. Everything was the very bottom end of the tolerance scale, and the deviation can be accounted for operator the operator. I went on and went ahead and started checking all of the rod journals, and of the rod journals, you want to go ahead and measure at a 90 degrees, two places for the same rod journal at a 90 degree to each other, as well as where each individual piston rides, since two pistons or two rods ride on each section of that particular part of the crank. And you record those values and you check it. Again, with these, it was the bottom of the tolerance scale, but every single one came exactly the same. There was no egg shaping. I think what I want to do is go ahead and have them turn every journal, take 10,000ths off. So yes, we're definitely turning the crank, whether we like to or not. The water jacket on this engine is pretty rusty, and that's going to be one of the things we're going to have the machine shop go ahead and do. They can hot tank it, they can bake it, they can flush a mild corrosive through the water jacket to get all the rust out. Well, a problem is chunks of that rust, flakes of that rust will break loose, go through the cooling system and end up in the heater core, and even worse, into the radiator, blocking up some of the passage of some of the small tubes in the radiator, reducing the amount of flow through the radiator, and thereby reducing its ability to cool the engine, inevitably resulting in an overheat situation, which could eventually potentially cause the cylinder to, or the head gasket to blow. Okay, a quick recap. So the final decisions, because we laid tools on this and measured it, not just guessed at it, we definitely need to hone the cylinders out quite a bit more than typical honing, probably more than what would be allowable just to hone a new ring. And also gives me an excuse to go ahead and put in those HyperEutectic Pistons, domed pistons that I already own. So I'm going to go ahead and bore it 30 over. We also are going to go ahead and turn the crank down, or get it ground down 10 under, because it's now a lot more suspect than I originally thought it was when I first tore it apart. So we're going to go ahead and get that done. Fortunately, I also just so happened to have some 10 under bearings to put in the whole thing, so that's not a big deal. Also, the other thing too is since the water jacket's got a lot of rusty in it, and I'm afraid it's going to plug up the radiator and affect the cooling possibilities. Go ahead, and it's a good idea to have them go ahead and rot that out good and well. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. The whole point of this exercise was to help clarify in my own mind what I want the machine shop to do. They're going to go ahead and check everything once again and come with better numbers and a number of suggestions. A couple of things I also wanted to do, of course, is do a check for cracks in the heads and the block, as well as check the flatness of the block if it needs to be machined a little bit, if they need to deck it just a little bit to clean it up. I'm not interested in bumping the compression ratio any more than is absolutely necessary, even though I'm putting the high dome pistons in. This isn't a race engine, this is a truck engine. So, and then also in the video on Turn It Down, I pointed out how pitted up and messed up the camshaft is. Since I know the camshaft that's currently in the engine in the C10 is a good camshaft, I'll go ahead and swap that one into this engine, since this is the engine that's going into the C10 to replace the one in the C10 that I'm going to turn around and build for the Chevelle. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, if you want to support us here at the Pit Stop Ranch, please hit the like button. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. That helps us out immensely. Otherwise, have an oil-tastic day.